Welcome again, everyone, to preparing forms for your NSF ATE proposal. The recording has started and we're ready to go. I'm now going to turn over to my colleague, Elaine Kraft. Elaine, go ahead and take us forward.
Thanks, Mike. I am the principal investigator for the Mentor Connect project. I would like to welcome all of you who have joined us today, especially our Mentor Connect participant colleges. Today's webinar is designed to guide you through the preparation of forms associated with submission of an NSF grant proposal. While these forms are not unique to the NSF ATE program, some of the instructions for how you should complete the forms are specific to ATE. Our goal is to help you prepare competitive grant proposals and avoid common mistakes as you prepare and submit your first proposal or your second proposal. Sometimes it takes us several tries to get these things right. The Mentor Connect team will provide guidance for completing the required forms. But please be reminded that we are not speaking on behalf of the National Science Foundation. The opinions we express are our own. We will share information from NSF publications as well as from our own experience and from having made of all the mistakes ourselves before getting it right. The PowerPoint presentation is available at a link provided in the handout for today's webinar. The handout was included in the email message that you received with the link for connecting to today's presentation. If you look on page 2 of the handout under Mentor Connect Resources, you will see how to access the PowerPoint presentation. Also, as Mike mentioned, this webinar is being recorded and will be archived and available for viewing within a week of today's broadcast. You will automatically be provided with that information. Joining me today are my friends and colleagues, Ellen Haas, who's tuned in from the Washington, D.C. area today, and Manjari Wijanike, who is joining us from the Seattle, Washington area. So this truly is a national webinar today with Mike in Arizona. Ellen is co-principal investigator for the Mentor Connect project, and Manjari serves as in a senior personnel role for the project. As you can see from this slide and the handout we provided, Ellen and Manjari both have years of experience completing the proposal forms we will be discussing. Now I will turn it over to Manjari to get the presentation started.
Hi, good morning. Actually, good morning on the West Coast, but I guess it's good afternoon on the East Coast and in the middle of the country. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. And I'm going to quickly go through a few of the background pieces of information that we need to put together as proposal submitters before we even get to the part of where we actually fill out the forms. The first slide I like to call your new best friends, because these will be, if you're planning to submit in October, these 2 documents are going to be your best friends for the next several months. First of all, the ATE solicitation. It's an invaluable resource, and it's something that you're going to need to refer to over and over again during the proposal and forms preparation process. And the second thing is the grant proposal guide. The grant proposal guide covers everything you need to know to submit a proposal to any division at the NSF. The ATE solicitation, however, includes information that is critical to ensuring that you meet all the requirements that are specific to the ATE program. And as it says in big red letters on this slide, this ATE solicitation will be new this spring. Check back for it often, and it's not out yet, so stay tuned. Another special note on the ATE solicitation, we recommend that you print it out and read the solicitation. Have it handy while you prepare your proposal, but we also suggest that not only your grants office, but also your faculty team read this document. The reason we suggest that is because it has some actual very good specific guidelines about developing and thinking about a project proposal and what kinds of categories you'd want to submit it under. So it's something that the more people that read it, the better. Okay. Now we're going to go on to even before you think about forms. Even before you think about starting your forms in FastLane, we encourage you to meet as a team and think about the following. The sponsored research office in most colleges submit the form at the submit the proposal at the end of the form's preparation process. The PI and the SRO, which is the sponsored research officer, should cross-check and sign off for completeness before submission. Very early in the process, do this tomorrow. Register your institution with FastLane and get your FastLane ID. Definitely not something you want to be doing in October. Figure out, if you don't already know, who your sponsored research office is and who has the authority to actually submit a proposal. A PI does not submit the proposal. The fiscal agent, which is the college, and the sponsored research office is the entity that will submit the proposal. So sometimes the PI thinks they've done it all, they're walking away from their computer, it's 4:59 in the afternoon, and the SRO has not yet hit the submit button. If the SRO has not hit the submit button, it has not gone in. Your proposal did not make it on time then. Remember also, you can park things in FastLane. It's not final till you hit submit. So you can put things up there, take them down, put them up again, look at it, see how it'll look when you print it out. Don't worry about that. It's not final till you hit submit, so you can start putting things up there sooner rather than later. Now, I'm going to just quickly draw your attention to this little light bulb icon. It indicates an important tip or trick relevant to the form being discussed on that slide. Tips and tricks come from our Mentor Connect team and your mentors, not the NSF. Lessons, as Elaine pointed out, stuff we learned the hard way, worth keeping in mind, definitely. And we just want to make this process easier for you, so easier for you than it was for us, let's say. So that's the reason we've drawn your attention to some tips and tricks. So let me start off by showing you the first thing that you need to think about. It's the grant proposal guide. So the grant proposal guide lives at this URL right here. It's worth checking it out sooner rather than later. And reading the fine print has never been more important than with the GPG. This quick visual to the right of your screen here will show you how it will look like when you go into the URL listed here. And if you click on the underlined hyperlink, you can find out more about a specific topic. For example, types of submissions, how to submit proposals, target dates, deadline dates, et cetera, et cetera. In the next slide, I'm going to show you what it looks like when it's blown up a little bit, because we understand that the previous slide was very tiny in font. So this slide will show you the specific areas in the GPG that cover the actual proposal preparation process. So you'll see things like format of your proposal, margin and spacing requirements. Believe me, they're important. What guidelines for your cover sheet, guidelines for your summary, guidelines for biographical sketches. So again, this is very important to read right at the get-go. Now, we're going to jump into FastLane. And I hope many of you have taken a little time to get into FastLane, or will take a little time to get into FastLane sooner rather than later, and play around, put your institution's ID number in there, sign in, start putting things up there. The reason we call this slide the FastLane version is that this is what you see when you get started inputting your information into FastLane. You'll click on each of these Go buttons and submit information for your cover sheet and project summary and so on. However, once you enter the information, it'll look quite different if you see it in hard copy or in a PDF. For the purposes of form completion, we think it will be more helpful for you to see the screenshots of exactly where you'll be entering the information, and also how it looks like when it's print ready. You'll be clicking the Go buttons, as I mentioned, to complete each form, and we are going to go through each of these forms individually. There are a few things that you do not need to worry about. They are the mentoring plan, the single, additional single copy documents, the suggested reviewers, and I'll tell you why. The mentoring plan is applicable only to proposals that include graduate students in the budget, not generally applicable to NSF ATE proposals. The additional single copy document is an option primarily used by research universities when the proposal contains proprietary or privileged information. Again, ATE proposals are not likely to ever need to include that. Suggested reviewers. So people often wonder if they should put in a list of suggested reviewers. You do not need to do that. Again, it's used in research proposals where the number of experts in the field are very limited and very specialized, usually, again, not applicable to NSF ATE, and this one, deviation authorization. Any deviation from proposal submission per the GPG requires advance permission, but again, not likely to be applicable to an NSF ATE proposal. There are two sets of supplementary documents you will be submitting, and we will describe them more later, but they're the other supplementary documents and the data management plan. But we will discuss them in more detail later in the webinar, so don't worry about those, but pay attention to those two items because you will be submitting those. Okay, now we're going to go on to the cover sheet. So here are some tips on this slide about completing the cover sheet. Let's go through the slide very quickly. The majority of ATE proposals, including small grants to those new to ATE, will be submitted in the ATE projects track. If in doubt, please ask your mentor or NSF program officer. Getting your proposal in the right category is very important. The right category for review is very important. The cover sheet provides the NSF with a concise summary of all the administrative data about the proposal. It certifies that all the statements in the proposal are true, and they will follow the appropriate federal grant regulations. It will include the electronic signatures of the PI and the institution. When the SRO or other submitting person clicks that they agree to the required certifications, that is deemed to be an electronic signature for the proposal. There is no, please note, no actual, let's look at that, no actual or electronic signature is signed or inserted. So that's an important point to remember, because that often causes panic towards the end. Okay, one important item on this page, this is how the proposal cover sheet will look like when it is actually printed out. This is not what it looks like when you're putting the information in. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is your NSF proposal number. Your proposal number becomes your grant number if your proposal is funded. Knowing your proposal and or grant number is very helpful at every stage. This is how you locate your proposal when you work in FastLane. The next thing I'm going to point out is the proposed duration of your project. A few tips about proposed duration. Projects invariably take longer than you think they will. Even if you think you can finish your work sooner, it is a good idea to request the maximum amount of time allowed for the type of grant you're requesting, typically 36 months. You want to allow time for evaluation upon conclusion of your scheduled project activities, so that needs to be counted in that set of months that you're suggesting. This form where you submit I'm also going to make a point about starting dates right here. So NSF is most likely to set your start date for the project on the date you have selected. Consider that what will work with your business office. For example, some business offices like start dates to be aligned with a fiscal year. Consider the time it will take to get faculty release time worked out when you want it to start and when you want it to start. So for example, if you receive your award notification in May and you selected a start date of September 1st, you have all summer to get this worked out. Choosing a mid-semester start date will make it difficult or even impossible, perhaps, to get people started working with grant support. So don't choose a date that is too early in the calendar year. This could result in receipt of your award notice on or after your requested start date, which then, of course, puts you behind from day one. Start dates cannot be changed very easily. The next important thing on this cover sheet is your title of your proposed project. This is really, really important. It's more important than you think it is. Don't use NSF in the title. Strive for something descriptive and meaningful. For example, expanding internships to improve success rates in engineering technology or bridge to biotechnology. On the other hand, don't be cute or demeaning. For example, calling a faculty development project turning bad technician educators into good ones is just insulting. So names that result in useful acronyms can be good, but do not create this at the expense of clarity. So think about your title. The next area that I'm going to point out is your PI information right here. So the PI, missing contact information for the PI or co-PIs sends a message to reviewers that you have not paid attention to details. If you don't do this carefully, you could end up with a PI or co-PI names on the cover with no email addresses or phone numbers or other information that does not end up in this cover sheet. And to a reviewer, that just looks sloppy. So do it slowly, check your work. You can always look at the print-ready version on Fastlane prior to submission. In fact, I'm encouraging you to print it out prior to submission and make sure that somebody goes over each line and ensures that all the information is accurate. In the next slide, you will see the second part of the certification page, and here is this so-called electronic signature that we talked about a minute ago that will be automatically inserted. And again, this is the print-ready version of the certification page. So to sum up, it's very important to choose the right program track, the ATE projects track. Make sure your length of the project is entered as months. Your requested start date should be a careful decision. Check the way this page looks before submitting to NSF, and please be thoughtful about your project title. It matters more than you think. The next slide shows you a form called the project data form. The project data form is interesting. It provides the reader or reviewer a quick glimpse of the discipline, the type of college submitting the proposal 2-year versus 4-year, potential numbers and kinds of populations who will be impacted, and an indication of the kind of proposal in the broadest terms. For example, when you start, this is where you will tell them if it's going to be an ATE project, the name of the principal investigator, who is submitting it. And this is an important area to remember as well. Other institutions that are involved, right there. Pay attention to this section on other institutions involved in the project. This can include organizations, businesses, or partner colleges and high schools. If your plan includes working with others outside of your college to achieve your objectives, this outreach and collaboration will be viewed positively by reviewers. So this is a good place to indicate who those people will be. Down here in items J, K, L, M, and N, you're going to be estimating the number of people who are potentially going to be impacted by the activities of the project while it is in operation. It's very important to give this some careful thought. Give some thought to the numbers you report in this section and keep a record of your calculations, as reviewers or an NSF program officer may ask for details on this section prior to funding. Right here. For example, don't underreport your anticipated impact. Here's an example. If you're planning to host a workshop to teach 20 high school teachers how to infuse geospatial technology into their classes, and you expect each of those teachers to use their new teaching module or geospatial technology tools in at least 8 classes over the life of your project, with an average of 25 students per class, then you have a good estimate of the number of high school students, right here, pre-college students, that you will impact. If you report only the number of teachers you will engage in your workshop, that is pre-college teachers right there, then you will be underreporting the potential impact of your project. Ask yourself this question. If a reviewer divides the amount of money that you're requesting by the number of people, this section right here, by the number of people that you anticipate impacting, will this project look like a good investment? So give some thought to the numbers you report in this section and keep a record of your calculations, because that is important in case the program offices come back to it prior to funding. There's one form that you do not have to worry about, the table of contents. Fastlane will generate this one for you. And now I'm going to open it up for any questions.
Thanks, Manjari. It's Mike here. We do have several questions. I just want to remind folks to put them into the chat window. Could I ask you to go back 2 slides to that Form 1295? Do you mind taking us back there for a moment?
You want this one? No.
That one, yeah, the 1290, the project data form. Now, one question came up. Look at number 4 there. You still have it highlighted, other institutions. So the question is, if you have a sub-recipient on your grant, does it go there? They don't have to be a sub-recipient to go there, do they? Would you clarify other institutions a little bit?
Sure. A sub-recipient, does the person mean a sub-award?
I think so.
Okay. They should go there, yes. You're only listing them so that the program officer and the reviewers realize who else is involved in this project.
It helps them understand the scope, yeah.
Yeah. And you do not need to be a sub-award to be listed there. You could be a partner in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, I think that was the heart of the question there.
Okay.
So it's not just sub-awardees. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if you're working with 3 high schools very closely, list them there. If you're working with a very significant business in your area, list them there. It doesn't mean that they're getting any money out of it.
Okay.
And Elaine, I'm going to also defer to you, to Elaine or Ellen, to if you have any other suggestions for who should go in there.
What do you think,
Likewise,
Elaine?
government agencies.
If they are going to make a difference in whether your project is successful or not, if they're going to contribute in any way, provide space for a meeting, participants, advisors, you know, if they're going to contribute in some significant way, this is a great place to put them. And you know, collaborations and partnerships are highly valued in ATE.
And I think the key point there is the project's operation. If they're going to be integral to the operation of the project, list them.
That makes sense. You know, let me ask you another question. We're on the same form, and I appreciated your comments, so did the audience, about that section J through N, about making good faith estimates there. I thought it was interesting that you talked about looking at the total cost per participant. I had this question myself, and one of our people online also forwarded it. Is there a target we should shoot for, $5,000 per person? I sound like I'm writing a Department of Labor tech grant. That's sort of a joke, but
wow.
What do you think?
I'm definitely going to see if Elaine or Ellen wants to take a stab at that. I personally would not, you know, have a ballpark number. It just should be reasonable based on your budget. So, you know, it shouldn't be costing. You shouldn't be training 10 high school students at the cost of $25,000 a student. That seems like not a good investment. But if it's something ridiculous like $10 a high school student, that may be unrealistic. So I'm also going to let Elaine and Ellen chime in here.
Elaine, what do you think?
I agree with Manjari. There's no target number. There's no rule of thumb at NSF that I'm aware of. But it does need to be realistic. You know, there needs to be some reasonable correlation between the number of people who will be impacted and the amount of money you're asking for.
What do you think, Ellen? You got a comment there?
No, I concur with both Manjari and Elaine on this. Again, there's no concrete number you need to search for, but the realistic aspect is just that, very real. It has to look, you know, the numbers need to not look out of the ordinary for who you're trying to serve and what you're paying to do that.
Well, good. Thank you all for responding to that. I'm going to move our slides forward to the question slide and hold here for a moment and bring forward one more question. One of our participants is from apparently a smaller school. Not sure if they have a SRO. Who can be an SRO? Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Can anyone be it, or do you have to? I mean, how does that work if you don't have one or if you don't know? Manjula, why don't you start with that, or Elaine? Yeah.
I think Elaine actually has had this question come up, haven't you, Elaine?
Yes, I have. And actually, anyone at the college can be entrusted with that responsibility. But it is just that. It is a responsibility. The SRO is the person who finally pushes the submit button that sends the proposal to NSF after receiving it from the principal investigator or from the person developing the proposal. When you submit the proposal, there are certifications that you sign off on behalf of your college. You are speaking for your college. You are committing your college. You are testifying to the truth of the contents of the document and any number of things like that. So it's not a responsibility to be taken lightly, but it can be assigned to anybody, and you set it up through the administrative rights in FastLane.
That sounds serious. Actually, it is, isn't it? Because they are responsible for committing their institution. So that's an interesting question. I think this came up, if you don't mind me elaborating, that if you start early on these things, you can get them in place. If you put them to the last minute, there's where the problems come, all right? Wouldn't you say, Elaine?
Sooner rather than later. This is a decision you need to make this week if you're planning to submit a support proposal. Figure out who your SRO is. And the more important thing is that they have permission to submit that proposal.
Sure. That makes sense.
And anybody who's going to do anything in FastLane has to be registered in FastLane. So those, that registration process of getting people set up so that FastLane recognizes them, is one of those things you do not want to put off until the last minute.
Am I right that only the SRO can actually register you with FastLane, or can you do that yourself? Elaine?
You have to have certain administrative rights to do that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
If this is the first time it's being set up with NSF, the NSF help desk can tell you how you do that for the first time for a college.
And if you go back a few slides, the FastLane help desk number is on that first slide, I believe, the one that's called Your New Best Friends. I should have pointed that out.
I'm going to go back there. Yeah.
Yeah, I cannot overemphasize how helpful that 1-800 number is. You want to make sure that you call that number whenever you have a question. They're incredibly helpful. It's right here, actually. They're very helpful.
Oh, down there. I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, FastLane user support is incredibly helpful. So if anyone runs into any problems getting anything into FastLane, they're the first stop. And believe me, I've had people tell me stories about how they call them crying and help, and they managed to get everything sorted out. So.
Very good. I'm going to jump us forward. Okay, let's go ahead and end our presentation, and folks, as we have more questions, we'll take them at our next question break. I'm pleased now to invite Ellen to take us forward. Ellen, I'm going to advance your slide. The floor is now yours. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike. I'd like to go over the project summary. Actually, what you see on your screen here are the actual instructions for getting your project summary into FastLane. And this is essentially your project one-pager. It's a summary of your project and includes 3 parts. It includes an overview, intellectual merit, and broader impacts. And your proposal will not be accepted if it is submitted without a project summary or if the project summary is incomplete and does not address all 3 of these areas. And to illustrate that, the actual form is set up as 3 distinct text boxes. You're required to submit information into all 3 text boxes. And your project summary, as I mentioned, in total should be no more than about a page in length, and NSF actually restricts your characters. All 3 text boxes need to total no more than 4,600 characters. So a way to do this is you can prepare your project summary in Word and then cut and paste directly into the text boxes. If you have in your project summary something like mathematical symbols that you feel really need to be there, or Greek letters or something of that sort, the text boxes will not support that. If that is the case, you will need to check the box at the top that says that you're going to upload it as a supplementary document. So it's not common for ATE proposals, but if in fact your project summary does contain special characters, you would need to upload your project summary as a supplementary doc. Otherwise, you would plan to use these 3 text boxes. And to go over the summary briefly, the overview is just that, a description of the activity that would result if your proposal were funded, and a statement of the objectives or methods that you'll be using. It should clearly indicate in the first few sentences the disciplinary focus of your project, the kinds of activities you're proposing, whether it be curriculum adaptation or professional development for faculty, and the primary audience for those activities. So you'll need to get right to the point of your grant and explain your proposal's objectives and what you're going to do to achieve those objectives. As a general rule, you don't want to use this space for building a rationale for your project, for describing your college or your community, or stating the amount of money that you're requesting. It should really be a concise overview, or as we say on this slide, your elevator speech. If this is all someone reads about your project, they should be able to understand what you're trying to do and your desired outcomes. And then we get to these other categories, intellectual merit and broader impacts. You want to be sure you understand what NSF means by those by studying the criteria provided. If I go back here, they actually will link you right here, give you criteria, and they'll link you to the grants proposal guide and give you some of the criteria that they're looking for in these areas. Under intellectual merit, they're looking for you to address questions such as what is the potential of the proposed activity to advance knowledge and understanding within its own field or across different fields. Under broader impacts, what is the potential of the proposed activity to benefit society or advance desired societal outcomes? The ATE proposal solicitation, the RFP, once it does come out, they're actually going to help refine this criteria further and give you other questions that are relevant toward evaluating ATE proposals, such as under intellectual merit. Does the project have the potential for improving student learning in science or engineering technician education programs? Are the goals and the plans for achieving them worthwhile and realistic? Under broader impact, you might address, has an assessment of workforce needs for technicians been conducted? Does the project work with employers to address future needs for technicians? And will the project's results be widely disseminated? They will list a host of questions under merit review principles and criteria when the AT program solicitation is out. You don't need to address all of those criteria, but you should certainly align with some of them and choose those that you feel are most relevant to your project and address those when crafting the intellectual merit and broader impacts of your proposal. And moving into the project description. As a form, this one is fairly easy in that you would upload it as one document. But the project description is the meat of your proposal. This is where you're providing a statement of work and the activities you're undertaking. This should address what you want to do, why you want to do it, how you plan to do it, how you'll know if you're successful, and what the benefits or impacts would be from a successful project. The project description would also include a timetable, a management plan, roles and responsibilities for PIs and co-PIs, evaluation and dissemination. And all of this needs to not exceed 15 pages in length. So again, you would upload your 15 pages as a single document. If you can, there are several supported file formats. It would convert that into a PDF, or you can upload it as a PDF. If you're converting it from Word, you do want to check when it is uploaded that, again, it doesn't exceed your 15 pages. Some tricks to the trade, I guess. This may seem like a no-brainer, but you really do want to pay attention to font size and layout. It really is crucial to the success of your proposal. While the grant proposal guide allows for a minimum font of 10-point, the ATE program strongly recommends you use an 11 or 12-point standard font, such as Times New Roman or Arial, to ensure readability. You'll want to use section headings, bullets, or charts to ensure a clear proposal. And again, note that any visuals need to be included in that 15-page limitation. You'll want to keep in mind that reviewers may be reading anywhere from 8 to 12 proposals, and yours could be the last one they're reading late at night. So using a small font, having a poor layout, or not clearly addressing topics in the solicitation will not encourage a good rating. As another point of formatting, you do not want to use automated endnotes. You can number your references in the project description and then list them in a separate reference section in FastLane, which Elaine will go over shortly. And references do not count towards your 15-page limit. Another note on the project description is that it should be self-contained and not include URLs to outside sources. For example, if you're talking about an industry partner, you don't want to include a URL that would outline a collaboration you have because reviewers are under no obligation to view those sites. That information could actually circumvent your page limitations, and those sites could be altered or actually no longer functioning between the time you submit the proposal and it's reviewed. So you do want to, again, as Marjorie said in the very beginning, the grant proposal guide is one of your best friends, and you're going to want to review that for the criteria and the content of the project description. One thing to note is that your project description must begin with results from prior NSF support, if that is applicable to you. If the majority of you are new to NSF funding, this would not be applicable, but if any PI or co-PI identified on the project has received NSF funding in the last 5 years, information on the award is required, whether or not the support is directly related to your proposal. So you would need to list that in the beginning section of your project description if that applies to you. Biosketches. Biosketches are required for each individual on a proposal identified as senior personnel. So anyone you are listing as senior personnel in your budget or on the project, you will need a biosketch for, including PIs and co-PIs. And NSF has a specific format. You're not just uploading resumes. You need to follow the prescribed format for biosketches. They're not to exceed 2 pages, and they should not include any personal information such as home addresses or phone numbers. This is actually a sample of a biosketch in the format that NSF requests. You would be looking at listing professional preparation, any appointments, products or publications, synergistic activities, and any associations, collaborations, or other affiliations. And it's a good idea to create a template for these biosketches if asking senior personnel to complete them so they can put in their information into this required format. And if we go back here, biosketches can be uploaded for each individual senior personnel. So all your senior personnel would come up here for you to upload a biosketch, or you can do it as the PI. You can upload it as one document under the PI, and then you just need to put not applicable under the other since you've uploaded it as one single document. And lastly, as we've said it before, this is something you can do as soon as possible. You can get the biosketches out of the way and input it into FastLane. They do take a little bit of time, so just getting one off your to-do list is always a good thing. And now I'd like to turn it over to Elaine to talk about current and pending support.
Thanks, Ellen. Current and pending support forms are required. Many people find these forms confusing. To understand how to correctly complete the forms, it helps to know why you are being asked to do so. This is the reason. NSF wants to know that individuals who will be working on the grant will not be committed for more than 100% of their time should the proposed project be funded. Also, NSF wants personnel working on grants to have dedicated time to do this work. The expectation is that grant personnel will have a portion of their normal workday or work week dedicated to the work of the grant, and that the cost of providing this time will be covered with grant funds. Alternately, or additionally, a person may be paid with grant funds for doing grant work when not under contract to the institution, which is frequently the case during summer months. We will talk more about this issue during the April Mentor Connect webinar on developing a budget and budget justification for your NSF ATE proposal. For now, just keep in mind that as you complete your current and pending support forms, that NSF will not allow a person to be more than 100% committed if he or she serves in a PI, principal investigator, co-PI, or senior personnel role for a funded project. That means that all of the person's work time cannot add up to more than 100% of a standard work day or work week for the person's job with the organization, and they may not be paid more than 100% of their normal salary. This means that faculty release time must be within their normal workload. It also means no overload pay for faculty who teach extra courses. In short, no extra pay for doing grant work in addition to regular workload. Now let's talk about how many of these forms you will need to prepare. Separate entries are required for each person serving in a senior personnel position, which includes your principal investigator, any co-principal investigators, and anyone else working on the project that you classify as senior personnel. And for each person, there must be a current and pending support form for all proposed or ongoing projects, including the proposal you're preparing. If a person currently has grant support and additional years of funding for the project are anticipated, you need to include the time that the person is likely to be committed. The Grant Proposal Guide tells us that current and pending support forms must include all current project support from whatever source. So if a person who will be working on the grant is receiving support from another grant funding source, federal, state, local, foreign government agencies, public or private foundations, industrial or other commercial organizations, this support must be listed. Please note that the Grant Proposal Guide also states that the proposed project and all other projects or activities requiring a portion of time of the PI and other senior personnel must be included even if they receive no salary support from the projects. Again, it has to do with that 100% of your time commitment. As you can see, the time commitments for all senior personnel who will be working on a project can't be taken lightly or taken for granted. If this is your first grant, you may have only one current and pending support form for each person serving in the principal investigator or senior personnel role. However, check to make sure that these individuals are not working on other funded projects such as Department of Labor grants, state-funded grants, or foundation-funded grants that will need to be reported. Now, let's talk about the information that you will need to supply on your current and pending support forms. There is a template in FastLane for preparing current and pending support forms. This is what the template looks like in FastLane. The process goes more quickly if you collect all of the information you will need prior to completing the form. I will talk you through each line for which you will be supplying information. Also, check and double check to make sure that the information that you submit in the current and pending support form is consistent with the information that you provide elsewhere in the proposal. The budget, for example, is one place where you will talk about the time commitment of personnel. NSF staff will check to make sure that the time commitment is consistent and done correctly. This is the list of information that you have to provide. The project or proposal title, which of course is whatever the project or proposal title is that for each one that you're doing. The source of support, that's who funded the project or who is being asked to fund the proposal. This may be the National Science Foundation, the Department of Labor, the U.S. Department of Education, the State of California, the Lumina Foundation, whoever has provided the support for that. Let's see if I can find one of these little hands here. There we go. The next is the project location. This is the institution who is requesting the grant or to which the grant has been funded. The next piece of information that you will, oops, wait a minute, there we go, is the total award amount of that particular award. The next thing you do is the starting date, and that is for this particular project that you're reporting about, and then the ending date for that project. And they give you, as you see here, the month, day, year designations, the way you will have to submit it on the form. Then it asks you for the support type, and you will check the boxes of which it is. If it is already funded, it's referred to as current, and if it's being proposed, it's pending. Now we get to the trickiest part of all, which is the person months per year committed to the project. And this is where most of the mistakes get made. This is a sample of your completed current and pending support form. In this particular case, the principal investigator has only one project. This was a small grant for institutions new to ATE, and this particular person had not had a grant before and had no other grants ongoing. So this person had just one entry. As I mentioned before, everyone that's in a senior personnel position will have at least one current and pending support form. You'll notice here they have current, pending, and then a couple of other categories. And this one is marked as pending. They've got the project title for the project, the source of support, which was NSF, ATE, the total award amount, and if it's a proposal, that will be the proposed budget that you're submitting. The dates would be the dates that you anticipate for your project that has not yet been funded, or the dates of an award that has already been received. Your location, the college, and then down here is the person months that I've mentioned to you. All right, let me go back just a minute to this section right here. If you see this designation right here, you see that says calendar months. So let's start there. This designation is typically used for people who are on 12-month contracts. While there are situations where a 12-month employee is 100% grant funded, it is more typical, especially for small grants, for a person to be working on a grant only a fraction of a 12-month work year. For example, if a 12-month employee is to dedicate 10% of his or her time to grant work, then the number you should put in the current and pending support form in this particular slot is 1.2 calendar months, which is 10% of 12 months. Note, you will be reporting the time in months, and you will use only one decimal place. Next, consider the faculty members who will be working on an academic calendar or academic contract. Typically, these faculty members have contracts for the academic year, and they may or may not have an additional contract for summer. This is where your math skills will be needed, because all of the time must be listed in months. So some translation will probably be required. For example, if a faculty member typically teaches 5 courses per semester, and this person will be provided with 1 course release time to work on the grant, both fall and spring semesters, that is considered 1/5 of the person's workload, or 20% release time. So you calculate 20% of the number of months covered by that academic year contract and report that in the academic time slot right here. If the release time for this person is just for 1 semester, then you would report half as much time in months based on the number of months covered by the person's academic calendar contract. Now let's consider a situation where the teacher who had 1 course release time for fall and spring semesters will also work on the grant in the summer. Again, you must determine the time the person will work on the grant in terms of months and report this in the summer category, which is over here. For example, the summertime commitment should be 1/2 month. Could be 1/2 month, which will be reported as 0.5 months. With faculty, therefore, it is possible to have time reported in both the academic category and the summer category. Or you could have them in both categories. As long as the calculations are not based on more than 12 months, the time commitment does not exceed 12 months, and the pay does not exceed 100% of what the college would have paid the individual to work that same amount of time doing other work for the college. Please note that if you have used calendar months, in reporting time for an individual. Under no circumstances should there be anything entered in the academic or summer categories. You can use this one or these two together, or you can use this one, but don't ever combine all three of them or the calendar with either of the other two. That's one of the biggest mistakes that gets made on these forms.
Elaine, it's Mike. Excuse me. We're not seeing your pointing quite as well when you're referring to this one and that one. So I just want to remind you of that.
Oh, is the little hand not showing up?
No, I'm not seeing it right there.
Huh, because it's on my screen. Well,
There's
okay.
mine. I'm pointing to I'm pointing to calendar right now. Okay.
Okay. Well, I have one on there too. I don't know why it's not showing up. Thank you for pointing that out to me.
Okay.
Let's see if
You're fine. Go ahead.
okay. All right. All right, let's move ahead now. In summary, for the current and pending support form, select the right time allocation type. Report by calendar, year, months, or by academic and/or summer months, but not both. Faculty on the grants is not limited to 2 months on ATE grants. The time on the project should be reasonable for the scope of work and be carefully aligned with each person's responsibility and grant duties. Reviewers and program officers are going to be looking to see that the time that you have personnel allocated to this project fits with the scope of work of the project. If it is a lot of work and not much time for the people to do the work, that raises questions. Conversely, if you have somebody that's with very small scope of work but a lot of time that's going to be supported by the grant, that's also going to raise questions. So be very careful that you've got a good alignment between the time that you're committing for people to work on the project and the scope of work that's being planned for the project. Another form to be filled out is the Facilities, Equipment, and Other Resources form. This form provides an opportunity to explain the infrastructure at your institution and perhaps at partner locations that will be available for use to support the success of the project. With this form, you should focus on equipment, infrastructure, and personnel that will or might be important to your project. It isn't necessary to describe all of the capabilities of the college. It can be distracting to reviewers if the descriptions do not seem to have a bearing on the project that has been proposed. NSF's instructions state that in order for NSF and its reviewers to assess the scope of a proposed project, all organizational resources necessary for and available to a project must be described in the Facilities, Equipment, and Other Resources section of the proposal. So this is where you do that. The Grant Proposal Guide states that proposers should include an aggregated description of the internal and external resources, both physical and personnel, that the organization and its collaborators will provide to the project, should it be funded. Such information must be provided in this section in lieu of other parts of the proposal, such as your budget justification or project description. These descriptions should be narrative in nature and must not include any quantifiable financial information. So note that in the instructions they do tell you not to put any monetary value on the information that you put on this particular form. The form offers the following categories for submitting information: laboratory, clinical, animal, computer, office, other, and major equipment. For ATE grants, the clinical and animal categories are typically not applicable. And Mike, if you could circle those or put a pointer on those since mine doesn't seem to be working. The clinical and animal are the two that and you'll notice on this particular sample they have noted that they're not applicable, and I would suspect that yours will be the same way. Laboratory support, however, is quite important for the success of implementation of an ATE grant. So you will want to describe your current capability even if the proposal includes some improvements or equipment additions. Computer capability can also be essential for your grant, especially if the project focuses on information technology, cybersecurity, and any number of other advanced technologies that are computer dependent and will make use of the computing capability and computer labs at the institution. Office support is also important to describe since budget guidelines specifically state that grant budgets may not include office furnishings or the everyday office equipment such as computers, copiers, and items that support normal office operations. Personnel implementing the grant, however, will definitely need office support to do so. In the other category, you can describe resources other than facilities and equipment such as personnel support. This is a place where you can describe, for instance, internal talent that you've assembled to serve as an internal advisory committee, or perhaps you have a college recruiter lined up who will support the outreach activities of the grant, but who will not receive compensation from the grant for doing so. A third example of personnel you may want to describe in this section could be an institutional research person who will be helping with internal evaluation and data collection. In other words, if someone is donating time to the project, this is the place to describe that donated time, but don't assign monetary value to the donated time. The major equipment category can be important for some ATE grants. Advanced technology programs are very often equipment intensive. Your institution may have major equipment that will be used in implementing the grant, or you may have a partner university or industry working with the project and providing major equipment for your students. Perhaps you have a university or industry partner with an electron microscope or a clean room that will be used for teaching your students. If major equipment is involved in the success of your project, this is the place where you can describe these resources. So you can see that the Facilities, Equipment, and Other Resources form gives you an opportunity to share information that you can't fully describe anywhere else in your proposal. The final set of ancillary materials for your proposal, known as supplementary documents, is the other place you can include additional information to support your proposal. Now let's talk a little bit about the references cited. NSF expects you to do some research in the process of developing a grant proposal. Like most funding sources, they encourage the use of research-based strategies and adaptation and implementation from previously funded NSF ATE or other funded projects. Your references indicate that you have investigated what others have done that worked. You will want to cite references that explain outcomes that led you to select a particular strategy, curriculum, teaching methodology, or other promising or proven approach to address the challenges in technician education that you're facing. Reference citations are also essential for the data that you provide in building your rationale. As you include information from your research, here's one tip to keep in mind, and Ellen mentioned this a little earlier. You will want to manually number your references throughout the project description and then prepare a separate document with citations that correspond to those numbers. Your references are actually a separate document and thus are uploaded separately into FastLane. References do not count towards your 15-page project description. You recall that I suggested that you manually number your references as you work. If you use automated endnotes, your citations will be included in your 15-page project description, and that's not where they belong, and you don't want to lose that space for that either. Now,
Elaine, it's Mike. I'm so very sorry to interrupt, but we just got so many interesting questions on the current and pending. Do you mind if we step back a little bit and make sure we grab those questions? Is that okay with you?
Fine.
Good.
Sure.
I'm going to take us right back to that slide for a moment. So just let me step back here. There's facilities. And here's that current and pending support form. Okay, so a couple of questions. Number one, suppose your institution funds part of your time, right? Do you have to show that on here, that it comes out of your college or your college's general fund? Does that have to be shown here?
If it is it's my understanding that it has to be an external funding source and not your employer unless it was a specially funded project at your institution. I mean, I'm thinking that would, again, it all goes back to that 100% thing, you know.
Yeah.
And with the college picking up part of a person's time to work on a grant, that's another thing that's a little bit tricky because there is a stipulation that you can't have any voluntary cost sharing. It's called voluntary committed cost sharing. And so if you do that, and if your college is providing that support, you want to make sure that you do not put that in the budget and that you do not attach a monetary value where it's described elsewhere in the proposal.
Well, that's important because there was another question exactly about that. The question is, and you just answered it, if my college agrees to offer part of my salaries, can we count this as in-kind? And the answer is no. You're not allowed to identify in-kind contributions except in very unusual circumstances. Is that correct?
That's correct. They have become more stringent in the enforcement of this particular rule. That you can have no voluntary committed cost sharing. For instance, several years ago, if you submitted a proposal and your college had an indirect cost rate, say of 30%, your college might have submitted that proposal only requesting 15% indirect, where that other 15% they were just going to, you know, waive as in-kind support. Now that is also forbidden. If whatever your negotiated indirect cost rate is, you must take it. You cannot not take it. They really have gotten very strict about the cost sharing issue. And essentially the issue there, again, I think sometimes it helps you to understand where some of these rules come from. They're trying to create a level playing field. And you've got wealthier institutions and less wealthy institutions. And if your wealthier institutions are putting a lot of personnel time and in-kind contributions of various types on the table for a proposal, it might sway reviewers, whereas another institution might not be able to do that sort of thing. So they really are trying to keep proposals evaluated on the basis of intellectual merit and broader impacts, and not on the basis of who's got the most money and resources to put on the table.
Good. That's a good response. One brief question. I'm going to circle this area right here where it says total award amount. You're not just referring to salaries there, are you? It really is the full project total award amount that you would read right on that front page of the proposal, right?
That's correct.
Good. That's just a point of clarification. Now here's a tough question. One of our attendees says, wait a minute, do you mean you can't pay faculty overload pay for supporting the grant processes? How do you answer that one?
Unfortunately, that's true. You can't. And it causes great grief in two-year technical and community colleges across this country, because our colleges, many faculty at our colleges typically teach overloads. They teach extra courses and get paid for it, obviously. But if they are doing grant work and getting supported by a grant, NSF will not allow that. And it doesn't matter which way you slice it. If they are doing the grant work as the overload part, they don't allow that. And if they are doing the grant work as part of their normal load but getting paid by the college to do something extra outside, like teach another class, that's not allowed either.
Okay, well that's interesting. I know that those are very important regulations. I know people can contact, we don't have a ton of time of course to go through all of this today. I know people might be able to contact you guys afterwards for some clarification. I appreciate the interruption there, but I think I'm going to take you back to where we were just starting on data management plans. I'm going to allow you to go forward there. Let me take you forward just a moment. And then we'll have one more question and answer period at the end, Elaine. So go ahead with your DMP stuff.
Okay, great. All right, data management plan. Thank you folks for hanging in here with us. You can see why we had a special webinar on forms. There are just so many of them, and every single one of them is very important in its own way. This data management plan is an interesting one. It is a fairly recent requirement for the ATE program and ATE proposals. Data management plans have been required for some time in the research directorates. And so now we're all trying to figure out what this means for us and how to do these right. The requirement is now that proposals must include a supplementary document of no more than 2 pages, and it must be labeled Data Management Plan. This supplement should describe how the proposal will conform to NSF policy on the dissemination and sharing of research results. And everything you do in your grant is referred to as a research result. You might say, well, I'm not doing research, I'm doing education. Well, for NSF proposals, it's all considered research. In essence, NSF expects you to share the outcomes of your work, and timely publication of results is encouraged. However, there are considerations of privacy, confidentiality, intellectual property, and other rights. The data management plan provides an opportunity for you to describe the care that will be taken in this regard for your project. NSF documents state that your data management plan should include the types of data, samples, physical collections, software, curriculum materials, and other materials to be produced in the course of the project. It says that you should provide the standards that will be used for data and metadata format and content, if that's applicable. You should include policies for access and sharing, including provisions for appropriate protection of privacy, confidentiality, security, and so forth. You should include policies and provisions for reuse, redistribution, and production of derivatives, which may not apply to your proposal, but provisions for reuse might, because you are producing things that we want other people to use, and you want to know under what circumstances they can use the materials that you produce. And lastly, plans for archiving the data, samples, and other research products, and for preservation of access to them. So it's important to NSF not only that you do this work and that you are careful with the data that you collect about it and that you share your results with people, but they also want what you do to be available to others long after your proposal has been funded, your project has been conducted, and the funding has ended. What happens to the information and data and so forth then? Your data management plan will be reviewed as an integral part of the proposal, coming under the intellectual merit or broader impacts, or both, as appropriate for the scientific community of relevance. As I mentioned, this is a relatively new requirement, and we're all still learning how to develop data management plans that will work for our projects and within our institutions. These plans do not need to be extensive, but they do need to address the specific requirements and comply with the intent of this form. I encourage you to visit the link on the screen for additional guidance on how to develop your data management plan. There's some great frequently asked questions at the link you see on the screen right now. There's a sample data management plan on the screen right now, and as you can see, this one was very short. It was for a small project. This is also something that's good to talk with your evaluator about when you're developing your proposal and as you go through it, because your evaluator very frequently is working with data from your project and will be very interested in your data management plan and what its specifications are. I will now turn it over to Ellen, and she will talk about the other supplementary documents for your proposal.
Thank you, Elaine. One of the supplemental materials that are required by the ATE program is a document that lists all of the known people that are receiving compensation from the grant and their affiliation. So an example of that is listed right here on the site, or on the slide. You'll just need to prepare a listing of the people receiving compensation from the project, both inside and outside your institution, and their affiliation. You don't need to list how much money. You just need to do the list of who and who they're with, and append that, upload that as one of your supplemental docs. And then also, while it's not required, it's certainly a good idea to obtain a few well-chosen letters of commitment for your proposal. And the key word here is commitment. Reviewers want to see documentation of the commitments that are described in the proposal, such as a letter from an industry partner pledging resources or time to the project. Letters of commitment should outline specific collaborations or partnerships or resources and not merely be letters of support. Letters that just endorse the project or offer nonspecific support or have repetitive boilerplate should not be included. Reviewers do take note of this. You can upload, again, the supplementary docs under that category in FastLane. If you're including letters of commitment, they must be obtained in or converted into electronic formats and uploaded into FastLane. If you have hard copy letters, you need to scan them. If you send or mail hard copy letters to NSF, they won't be looked at or provided to reviewers. So again, it all has to be included electronically. And you'll submit it as a single document. So if you want to put your list of people receiving compensation and then you have a shining letter from industry that you want first, you need to put them in the order you want them and upload them that way into FastLane. And some generally good ideas, we've said it throughout and we'll say it again, is to start early. And review what you've written and use FastLane, as Marjorie said in the beginning, as a parking lot. Put things up, see how they look, play with the system. You can always change and edit before you hit submit. And don't be afraid to ask questions. We know we have a lot in the chat box that we're going to get to right now. Nothing is too trivial to ask. Even following this webinar, ask your mentors, ask the Mentor Connect staff, and there's contact information that will be supplied. We're here to try to help you through this process. We're learning through trial and error, and any things that you raise that we can address, we're happy to help with. And with that, I'll ask Mike to moderate some of the questions that have come in.
Thanks, Ellen. Let's turn right back to some of those financial questions. Not surprising that they're some of the dominant ones because they're important. What if an institution has no negotiated indirect rate, or maybe not yet? What do you do? Ellen, as long as I've got you, why don't you take that one, or you can kick it to somebody else if you like.
I'd actually like to kick that one to Elaine if she doesn't mind.
Okay, Elaine, what if an institution, yeah, go ahead, Elaine.
All right, this is another tricky area. I've been told by NSF program officers that if your institution does not have an indirect, negotiated indirect cost rate, federally negotiated indirect cost rate, that you will not be able to apply for one until you are being recommended for funding. And so you can't start working on that now, unfortunately. And once you are recommended for funding, then NSF can make a referral for you to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, who does most of the negotiated indirect cost rates. I don't believe that NSF provides those. And so it is a process. You can use a stand-in rate when you develop your proposal. And they don't really have this guideline written down, anywhere for you. But I would make some inquiries of institutions, your size, your type, around, kind of find out what their indirect cost rates are, and use something that's reasonable. If your real indirect cost rate ends up being less than the one you put in your proposal, then the difference, you will have to use the real one, the negotiated one, once you get it. Well, that will give you some cushion in your budget, and typically your program officers will let you put that money back in your budget to do more activities or buy more supplies or whatever it is you need to do for your project. On the other hand, if you put a number that is too low, say you put in 6% and your real rate ends up being 30%, then you're going to have to go back into your budget and find the difference in that amount of money, and that is very difficult to do. So if you're using a stand-in indirect cost rate as you develop your proposal and budget, I would suggest that you use one that's a little higher than yours might turn out to be, rather than lower, because it's an easier adjustment to make when you have to make the adjustment. But if you don't have one, that rate will be determined as you after you've been recommended for funding, but before you get your award, and you will have to use that specific rate.
Elaine, this is Mike. I had a colleague that used one of those provisional rates, and they used 10%. 10% of total direct costs. That was their indirect, and then ultimately it got negotiated. But your concept of using maybe a slightly higher rate to make it easy to adjust if you don't have one. I guess your SRO, if you have an SRO, would know this, wouldn't they? They would know about this indirect stuff.
Usually, it just depends on how long they've been doing it, and whether they perhaps have come from another institution that already had one, that sort of thing. And there are more than one way to calculate the indirect cost rates, and there are costs in the budget to which indirect costs cannot be applied. And we'll talk about all of that during the budget webinar in April.
Oh, that's right. That's coming up. Okay, very good. We're just perfectly on time, getting right near the end here. There's one other question that I'll just try on you. I'm not sure I understand it totally, but it's the pending forms, right? Pending support forms. The question is, so we don't need to include the faculty contract. I think what the person is saying is that the form doesn't necessarily have to add up to 12 months. As you're filling it out for each person. It doesn't necessarily add up to 12 months there. The faculty contract is their normal teaching load, I think. So you don't put that in there. It's just the federally funded or externally funded. Is that correct?
That's right. So, if a person's on say a 10-month teaching contract right now, and then they're going to have 1.2 months dedicated to this project if it gets funded, you just report those 1.2 months, and then when the time comes, it'll be expected that 1.2 months will be within that 10-month contract.
Okay.
For people that have multiple projects going on at the same time, though, and I have seen several current pending forms, report forms for people that might have had 4 or 5 projects. Then what the NSF program officers and reviewers are going to do is they're going to kind of run down that page and add up all those months and see how much it's adding up to, and to determine whether that's realistic or not.
Right.
Is it adding up to more than a full-time equivalent, or is this person clearly can't do all of this and be a department head or whatever else it is they say their job is. So, they're going to look at the reasonableness of it all and whether or not they really think they're going to be able to do the work that they say they're going to do.
That makes sense. I'm going to turn one more question to Manjari. You might have seen the question in the chat window. How much time should I allocate to an effort like this? And one of our attendees gave their own opinion at 2 full months of time. That's a pretty sobering amount. What do you think, Manjari, if you had to guess how many hours of time you would spend?
The pre-process?
Creating a proposal.
All of the forms preparation.
Well, let's assume we mean everything here, the proposal and the forms. How much would you set aside to do it?
Well, the grant writing process, I would not even venture to guess how long that would take. It's so dependent on the team and how much each person puts, how you get that content together. The forms part of it, again, is really, really subjective. The recommendation I can make is to do some things like Ellen mentioned, things like the bibliography and the bio sketches well ahead of time. And again, the things like even a bio sketch can take a good hour per person if you have to do it from scratch. I would definitely set aside an uninterrupted chunk of maybe like a whole day to get all the forms at least started. That way you know what's missing, you know what you need to put in, you need to know you'll know what you need to collect from other people in your college, and you'll have time to contact your mentor or your program officer or NSF Fastlane assistant if you're running into problems. And I do this well, it's sort of at the end of September, well before you're ready to submit this proposal. I think the critical question is not so much how much time you will need to put these things in, because again, that is highly variable, And Ellen and Elaine, I'm going to defer to you to if you have any other opinions on how, if you have a ballpark number. The critical thing is not how long it will take, but how early you do it. So sorry, I'm dodging that. I'm dodging a little bit.
What do you think, Ellen? How much time would you allocate to do either just the forms part or the whole thing? We got a comment there, and then we'll move on to our final question.
I think it depends as if this is the first time you've done it or not.
Yeah.
And how many people you're putting, how much current and pending support you have. So there are a lot of variables that go into that. So again, I don't know that I could specifically answer that question. The more familiar you are with the forms, I think the faster they go.
I think you're right.
And the good thing is that every time it goes a little faster.
Yeah, this is true.
Okay, we're making me feel a little bit better here anyhow. I was getting intimidated by all of this, but now I feel a little bit better. Folks, there's a couple of questions we won't have time to. You can see some questions about evaluator qualifications. We won't be able to address those today. There's one small one I'd like to give to you, Elaine, on the pending support. If you have a subaward, do you put in the amount on the form, the amount of the subaward or the total amount of the grant that you're subbing to?
I think it's the total amount of the grant that you're subbing to.
Okay, I think you're right there. So let's take that as the answer there. Now, let's go ahead, Elaine. I want to turn to you now as we get right towards the end of this really excellent webinar today. Why don't you take us forward and tell us what's coming up?
Okay, I suspect that now you see why the topic of forms is both important and at times befuddling. As you work on the forms for your proposal, the NSF Grant Proposal Guide and the Mentor Connect resources can help you get it right. Just keep in mind that you want these forms associated with your proposal to work for you and not against you. So don't let them, don't be sloppy about it, last minute about it, because reviewers will think that you just have not had enough attention to detail for this proposal. If you've got really nice, crisp, well done, correctly done forms associated with your proposal, it can't do anything but help you. Two other essential components for development of a competitive NSF ATE grant proposal are evaluation and budgets and budget justifications. These topics will be covered in 2 additional technical assistance webinars being offered this spring. As with this webinar, there is no cost to participate. However, you must register. Registration links for these upcoming events will be provided at www.teachingtechnicians.org. And we hope you will join us. You see that the next one coming up is on evaluation, and it's in March, and then we'll be doing the budgets and budget justifications in April. There are numerous ways to contact us and interact with Mentor Connect, so we look forward to hearing from you. Now, I will turn the program back over to Mike at NATEC Networks for a closing activity.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Folks, we'd like to help us justify these webinars, the costs and the effort that it takes to do them by helping us answer these simple survey questions. So I have an embedded survey here which will appear on your screen. Now presenters, make sure you don't click on this. So please take just a moment to answer these simple questions. There's some radio buttons and a couple of places to put in the boxes that will really help us improve this webinar series as we go forward. So thank you for doing that. As you know, it's really important to help us explain to the NSF the impact of these activities that we have. So as we're doing that, we're ready to wrap up today. Let's circle back through our attendees. Ellen, I was impressed with your very last slide that basically says start early. I guess that's really one of the strongest messages from today, isn't it?
Yes, I would definitely advocate on starting early, and it feels good to get something in the fast lane and have it done and off your checklist. A little less daunting as you move forward.
Yes. How about you, Mandri? There's good advice, start early. What else would you say? You mentioned having a good team to work with you. That's important too, isn't it?
Absolutely having a good team, having people all read the proposal guide and the ATE solicitation guide. It's interesting. I think the more people that read that, the better the proposal ends up being. And that includes the faculty. It's not just the responsibility of the person who is technically writing the grant. Have everyone double check every single form. And there is a way that you can do a print-ready version and print it out before you hit submit. That's really helpful too. I'm always a proponent of saving trees, but in this case, print it out, go through it with a pen.
That makes sense. Elaine, we're going to give you the last comment for today. One comment to people filling out the survey. I think you may have to click the other button, radio button, in order to put things into the box there, so thank you for that. Elaine, you've got the last words for today. We're perfectly on time, a good webinar. Final piece of advice you might give to folks online.
Well, the main thing is that you really don't have to do this alone. A number of us working with the Mentor Connect project have looked at each other and said, where were we when we needed us? The ATE program at the National Science Foundation is now 20 years old. There's 20 years of excellent experience. Mike has actually been in the program about as long as I have, and and that's the nice thing about having a program that has been around as long as this one, is that there are people out there who've had experience, who've been down the road, who've made the mistakes and learned some things, who can help you. And it is a very sharing community. We are all very willing to tell you what we know and help you along. And we want you to be successful, and we'd love to have new grantees in the ATE program. So don't hesitate to reach out, and as you do your research for your project and find other projects and centers funded by ATE, reach out to them, call them, send them an email. Most of them are delighted to hear from you, and we'll get back in touch with you and help you along the way.
That's great advice. It really is a great network, isn't it? Well, thank you to all of our presenters for the time that you've made today, and also the participants for your interesting questions. Good luck with your ATE proposals. Presenters, please stay on the line. I'll disconnect us from the teleconference in just a moment. And now, everyone, this officially ends our webinar. Go ahead and finish your surveys. I'll leave it up. Click the submit button. I'll leave it up for another 5 minutes or so. So thanks, everyone. Goodbye.